The warning came on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Jake Harrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarms started screaming across every military base on Earth. He set down his mug and ran to the command center, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do we have?" he asked, stepping into the war room. Lieutenant Chris Parker looked up from his console, his face pale. "Sir, we have 300 unknown vessels at the edge of the solar system. They just appeared out of nowhere." Jake felt his stomach drop. 300 ships. Earth's entire defensive fleet had maybe 50 vessels, and most of those were patrol craft and mining escorts. This was not a fair fight. This was not even close to a fair fight. "Get me everything we know about them," Jake ordered. "And someone wake up the council. Tell them we have visitors." Within an hour, the United Earth Council was assembled in their emergency chamber. Jake stood before them, trying to look calm, even though his hands wanted to shake. These were the leaders of every nation, every colony, every human settlement scattered across the solar system. They looked scared. He could not blame them. "The fleet is holding position at the outer edge," Jake explained. "They have not moved closer, but they have sent us a message." "Play it," said Ambassador Kate Richardson. She was Earth's chief diplomat, a woman who had spent 20 years negotiating treaties between the colonies. Now she had a new challenge. Now she had to negotiate with aliens. The hologram flickered to life in the center of the room. The creature that appeared was tall and covered in dark scales. Its eyes were yellow and cold. When it spoke, the translation software turned its words into perfect English. "I am Commander Vextel of the Zethkar Empire. We control 47 star systems. We have conquered 73 species. Now we come to you with an offer." The room was silent. Everyone was holding their breath. "You will surrender within 72 hours. You will accept your place as servants of the Empire. You will work for us, mine for us, build for us. In return, we will allow you to live. This is the deal we offer every species. Most accept. Those who refuse are destroyed." The hologram showed images then. Cities burning. Ships exploding. Planets turned to glass. The message was clear. Surrender or die. You have 72 hours to respond. We expect your answer soon. We always receive an answer soon. They always beg. They always plead. They always hope for mercy. The alien's mouth twisted into something like a smile. "We will hear from you soon." The hologram vanished. For a long moment, nobody spoke. "Well," said Kate finally. That was direct. The council erupted into chaos. Everyone was talking at once. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to run. Jake stood at the front of the room and let them argue. He needed to hear every idea, even the bad ones. Dr. Lisa Monroe sat in the corner, watching and listening. She was the chief xenolinguist, the person who studied alien languages and cultures. She had been studying the Zethkar for the last hour, reading every piece of information Earth's long-range sensors had collected about them over the years. "They are a psychological warfare species," Lisa said quietly. Most people did not hear her. She raised her voice. "They use psychological warfare." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. "Explain," Jake said. Lisa stood up and walked to the hologram display. She pulled up images and data. "The Zethkar have conquered 73 species in the last 200 years. That is a lot. But here is what is interesting. They rarely have to fight." She showed them records from other species, information collected by long-range observation. They arrive, they threaten, and the species surrender. The Zethkar are masters at breaking spirits. They make you afraid. They make you feel small. They make you want to beg for mercy. "So what do we do?" Kate asked. "Every species they have conquered followed the same pattern," Lisa continued. "First panic, then desperate communication. Pleas for mercy. Offers of tribute, bargaining, begging. The Zethkar feed on this. They enjoy it. Their entire military strategy is built around breaking your will to fight before the fighting even starts." Jake was listening carefully now. What are you suggesting? I am suggesting we do not play their game, Lisa said. She looked around the room at all the scared faces. What if we do not respond at all? What? Someone shouted. That is crazy. Is it? Lisa challenged. They expect us to communicate. They expect us to beg. What if we give them nothing? What if we go completely silent? The room erupted again. This time the arguments were even louder. Jake held up his hand for silence. Explain your thinking, he said to Lisa. The Zethkar psychology is based on dominance through communication, Lisa said. They need to hear your fear. They need to hear you acknowledge their power. What happens when you refuse to play? What happens when you give them nothing to work with? Captain Dan Sullivan spoke up from his seat. He commanded Sentinel-7, one of Earth's biggest defensive stations. It would throw them off balance. They have a script they follow? If we do not follow our part of the script, they will not know what to do. It is more than that, Lisa added. Silence is power. When you refuse to speak, you refuse to give them information. You refuse to show weakness. And most importantly, you refuse to acknowledge their authority. Jake was thinking hard. It was a crazy idea, but they were facing 300 warships with only 50 ships of their own. Conventional warfare would be a massacre. Maybe crazy was what they needed. What about coordination? Asked Commander Beth Torres through the video link from Mars. Our colonies are spread across the solar system. We need to communicate to coordinate defenses. We use hardlines and laser communications only, Jake said, the plan forming in his mind. Ship to ship, station to station, line of sight only? Nothing broadcast that they can intercept. We have emergency protocols for this. We practice for solar flare emergencies. We can operate in communication silence. For how long? Beth asked. For as long as it takes, Jake replied. The debate went on for hours. Jake let everyone speak. This was too important for him to just order it done. They needed to choose this together. Finally, Kate stood up. I call for a vote. All in favor of maintaining complete communications silence with the Zethkar fleet, raise your hand. It was close. Very close. But the vote passed. Then it is decided, Kate said. From this moment forward, Earth and all its colonies will maintain absolute silence. No broadcasts. No communications with the Zethkar. We prepare for war in silence. Jake immediately began issuing orders. I want every ship and station to shut down all broadcast communications. Laser and hardline only. Beth, get your people on Mars into the underground shelters. Don, prepare Sentinel-7 for combat. Chris, send the silence protocol to every human vessel in the system. What do I tell them, sir? Chris asked. Tell them to hold the line. Tell them to trust the plan. Tell them we will speak again when this is over. The orders went out. Across the solar system, human colonies and ships received the same message. Go silent, prepare for war. Trust each other. On Mars, Beth Torres read the order and felt her chest tighten. She looked at her crew, at the people who trusted her to lead them. You heard the order, she said quietly. Cut all broadcasts. Get the civilians underground. Move fast and move quiet. On Europa, Lieutenant Paul Brennan was already sealing the colony's underground habitats. They had always known they were vulnerable out here, so far from Earth. Now that vulnerability was about to be tested. On Sentinel-7, Don Sullivan checked his weapons systems. His station had been built to defend Earth from asteroid threats. Now it would defend against something much worse. He looked at his crew and nodded. They nodded back. No words were needed. In orbit around Earth, dozens of military vessels powered up their weapons and sealed their systems. They formed a defensive line, silent and waiting. The Zethkar sent more messages. They threatened. They demanded. They sent images of destroyed worlds. Each message was met with absolute silence. Commander Vextal sat in his command ship and stared at the communications panel. Nothing, not a single response. He had conquered dozens of species, and they all responded within the first few hours. Usually with begging, sometimes with defiance. but always with communication. This silence was unusual. It made him uncomfortable. Perhaps they are primitive, suggested his second-in-command. Perhaps they do not understand our message. They understand, Vextal said slowly. They have space travel. They have colonies. They understand. He stared at the silent planet below. This is something else. Back on Earth, Jake stood in the command center and watched the countdown timer. 68 hours until the deadline. The aliens kept sending messages. Earth kept staying silent. Sir, the Mars colony reports they are secure, Chris said. All civilians are in shelters. Military forces are positioned. Europa reports the same. Sentinel-7 is ready. All ships are in position. Jake nodded. They were ready. As ready as they could be with 50 ships against 300. The odds were terrible. But maybe, just maybe, silence would be their weapon. Kate Richardson stood beside him. Do you think this will work? She asked quietly. I do not know, Jake admitted. But I know that begging would not work. I know that surrender would mean slavery. At least this way, we fight on our terms. In silence, Kate said. In silence, Jake agreed. The silence held. 48 hours had passed since the Zethkar ultimatum, and not a single human had responded. Not one plea. Not one message, nothing. Commander Vextal paced on his bridge. His crew watched him nervously. They had never seen him like this before. Usually by now the conquered species would be flooding their communications with desperate offers and terrified begging. The silence from Earth was unnatural. It was wrong. Send another message, Vextal ordered. Tell them we will destroy their outer colonies first. Tell them they can save lives by responding now. The message was sent. The message was ignored. On Mars, Beth Torres crouched in the command bunker beneath the red soil. Her tactical display showed the Zethkar fleet beginning to move. They were coming closer, entering the inner solar system. She wanted to warn Earth. She wanted to call for help. But the orders were clear. Maintain silence. She looked at her communications officer, a young woman named Maya Chun. Maya's hands hovered over the controls, ready to send any message Beth ordered. But Beth just shook her head. Not yet. Not ever, if they could help it. All defensive satellites are armed and ready, reported her weapons officer. Targeting solutions are locked in. Beth nodded. They had prepared for this. Every person knew their job. Every weapon knew its target. They had trained for months using only visual signals and prearranged plans. Now that training would be tested. The Zethkar fleet was spreading out, surrounding the solar system like a net. Vextal was being careful. He was worried, Beth realized. The silence was working. It was making them uncertain. On Europa, Paul Brennan watched ice crystals form on the window of his command post. The colony was deep under the ice now, sealed tight. His small defense force was hidden in prepared positions around the moon. They had 6 ships, old mining vessels that had been armed with whatever weapons they could mount. Against the Zethkar armada, they were nothing. But they would fight anyway. Paul's second-in-command leaned close and whispered, Sir, should we call Earth? Let them know we are ready? Paul shook his head. They know. Everyone knows their part. We hold in silence. Back on Earth, Jake Harrison had not slept in 2 days. He stood in the command center, watching the enemy fleet move through his solar system. Every instinct told him to communicate, to coordinate, to send orders. But the whole strategy depended on silence. The Zethkar could intercept any broadcast. They could learn human positions, plans, weaknesses. Silence kept them blind. Sir, the deadline is in 24 hours. Chris Parker said. Jake nodded. I know. How are our forces? All ships report ready. All stations report ready. The colonies are secure. Chris paused. They are all waiting for orders. They have their orders, Jake said. Hold the line. Defend their positions. And stay silent. Dr. Lisa Monroe was monitoring Zethkar communications from the intelligence center. She was learning a lot. The aliens were talking to each other constantly, and Earth sensors were picking up everything. "Admiral, you need to hear this," Lisa said through the secure hardline. Jake walked to her station. She played a recording of Zethkar internal communications, translated by the computer. "The humans do not respond," one voice said. "This is not normal behavior." "Perhaps they are broken already," another replied. "Perhaps fear has silenced them." "Or perhaps they are planning something," a third voice warned. "I do not like this silence." Lisa looked at Jake. "They are arguing among themselves?" "The silence is making them paranoid. They do not know what it means, so they are imagining the worst." "Good," Jake said. "Let them worry." The hours continued to pass. The Zethkar sent more messages. They showed videos of their previous conquests. They threatened. They promised mercy. They did everything they could to provoke a response. Humanity said nothing. "Captain," Don Sullivan stood on Sentinel-7 and watched a Zethkar scout ship pass within 1,000 kilometers of his station. He wanted to fire. He wanted to blow it out of space. But the order was to hold. Wait until they committed to an attack. Let them wonder. Let them guess. His weapons officer looked at him questioningly. Don made a small gesture with his hand. "Hold fire." The officer nodded and kept his fingers away from the trigger. The scout ship moved on, scanning the station but not attacking. It was probing, testing, trying to understand human defenses. Don let it scan. The station was shielded and hardened. Let them see walls of metal and power. Let them wonder what was inside. On a mining station in the asteroid belt, Captain Ryan Mitchell prepared his squadron. He commanded 12 ships, small fast frigates that had been used for asteroid defense. They were hidden among the rocks, their engines cold, their systems silent. The Zethkar had passed them twice without seeing them. That was the advantage of silence. That was the advantage of patience. Ryan looked at his crew. They communicated with hand signals now. Point at a screen. Thumbs up, nod. They had practiced this. They were ready. The deadline came and went. Vextel stared at his chronometer as the final second ticked away. Still no response from Earth. Nothing. He felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt uncertain. "They have ignored the deadline," his second-in-command said. "What do we do?" Vextel knew what his empire expected: attack, destroy, conquer, but something felt wrong. This silence was a trap. He was sure of it. But what kind of trap? "Begin the invasion," he ordered finally. "But carefully. I want scout ships forward. I want probes testing their defenses. Do not commit the main fleet until we understand what they are planning." The Zethkar fleet began to move forward. 100 scout ships broke away from the main formation and headed toward the inner planets. They approached Mars first. Beth Torres watched them come. Her hands were steady now. The waiting was over. Now came the fighting. "Hold until they are in range," she ordered silently, using hand signals. Her crew acknowledged. The Zethkar scouts entered orbit around Mars. They began scanning the surface, looking for targets. They found the defensive satellites that Mars had placed in orbit. Old, outdated weapons platforms. Easy targets. The scouts opened fire. 3 satellites exploded in the first salvo. Beth did not react. She watched silently as more satellites were destroyed. The Zethkar were testing responses. They wanted to see if the humans would panic, would call for help, would break silence. She gave them nothing. 5 more satellites gone. The scouts were moving closer now, growing confident. They thought Mars was defenseless. Beth waited. She waited until the scouts were fully committed, until they were close enough that they could not easily retreat. Then she gave the signal. Every hidden weapons battery on Mars opened fire at once. The surface erupted with missile launches. Laser batteries that had been hidden under camouflage netting lit up the sky. The carefully positioned defense ships that had been hiding in Mars's shadow came roaring around the planet with weapons blazing. The Zethkar scouts never had a chance. Caught by surprise, caught in a kill zone, they died in silence. No warning had been given. No challenge issued. Just sudden, overwhelming violence. Vextol watched the destruction of his scouts in disbelief. One moment they were scanning an apparently defenseless world. The next moment they were all dead. How did they coordinate that? His tactical officer asked. We detected no communications. How did they know when to fire? Vextol had no answer. The humans had executed a perfect ambush without sending a single signal. It should not be possible. But they had done it. Pull back the remaining scouts, he ordered. This changes everything. On Earth, Jake watched the battle reports coming in through the hardline network. Mars had held. The first test was passed. But he knew this was just the beginning. On Europa, Paul saw the Zethkar scouts approaching his position. He had learned from Mars. He waited until they were close, let them think Europa was helpless, then sprang the trap. His small force destroyed 8 scouts before the rest retreated. On Sentinel-7, Dan's station was attacked by a dozen scouts. He waited until they were committed, then activated his station's hidden weapons. The station that looked like a simple observation post revealed massive defensive cannons. More scouts died. In the asteroid belt, Ryan Mitchell's squadron struck at the Zethkar supply ships. They appeared from nowhere, fired their weapons, and disappeared back into the rocks. All in silence. The supply ships burned, and the Zethkar had no idea where the attack had come from. Vextile was beginning to understand. The humans were not silent because they were afraid. They were silent because they were smart. They were using silence as a weapon. Without communications, they left no trail. Without broadcasts, they could not be tracked. Without signals, they could not be anticipated. They are fighting like ghosts, his tactical officer said. We cannot predict them. We cannot track them. They appear, strike, and vanish. Vextile looked at the casualty reports. He had lost 150 scouts in the first day of combat. That was more losses than he had suffered in his last 5 conquests combined. Send a message to the humans, Vextile ordered. Tell them I wish to negotiate. Tell them we can reach an agreement. The message was sent. The message was ignored. On Earth, Kate Richardson read the message and smiled coldly. They want to negotiate, she said to Jake. Let them want, Jake replied. We are not done yet. The battle continued. More Zethkar ships entered the solar system. More. Commander Vextile called an emergency meeting with his senior officers. They gathered in his war room, looking worried. The campaign that should have been easy was turning into a nightmare. Explain to me how we have lost 200 ships to an enemy that will not even talk to us. Vextile demanded. Subcommander Rethick pulled up tactical displays. They are using pre-planned coordination. Everything is arranged in advance. They know where to be and when to strike without needing real-time communication. That is impossible, another officer protested. Space combat requires constant coordination. Situations change every second. They should not be able to do this. But they are doing it, Rethick said quietly. They are doing it very well. Vextile stared at the displays. The human forces were scattered across the solar system, but they fought like a single-minded creature. Every attack was coordinated. Every defense was perfect. And they did it all without sending a single message that the Zethkar could intercept. What about their hardline communications? He asked. We cannot intercept them, sir. Line-of-sight laser communication is impossible to hack from a distance. And their physical cables are inside their ships and stations. We would need to board them to access those systems. Vextile slammed his fist on the table. Then we will board them. Prepare assault teams. We will take their stations and learn their secrets. On Earth, Jake Harrison received warning through the hardline network that the Zethkar were preparing boarding actions. He had expected this. The enemy was getting desperate. Send the signal to all stations, Jake ordered. Protocol 7. Protocol 7 meant destroy everything if capture was certain. No information could fall into enemy hands. More importantly, no ability to communicate could be captured. The silence had to be maintained. Chris Parker relayed the order through the laser communication network. Every station acknowledged. They understood. They were ready. The Zethkar launched their boarding assault against a mining station in the asteroid belt. 20 assault craft carried 200 soldiers. They approached the station carefully, expecting resistance. The station was silent. Its weapons did not fire. It just hung there in space, dark and quiet. "Something is wrong," Rethik said as he watched from the command ship. "They have abandoned it," Vextel said. "Cowards. Board it and take everything of value." The assault teams entered the station. They found it empty. The humans had evacuated. But more importantly, they had destroyed every computer, every communication system, every piece of technology that might be useful. The station was a hollow shell. "There's nothing here," the assault team leader reported. They destroyed it all before leaving. Vextel felt his frustration growing. Find the humans. They cannot have gone far. But the humans had gone far. The station's crew had evacuated hours ago in small mining shuttles, moving silently through the asteroid belt. They were picked up by Ryan Mitchell's squadron and brought to a hidden base deeper in the belt. The Zethkar never found them. The boarding assault was tried 3 more times. Each time, the humans evacuated and destroyed everything. Each time, the Zethkar captured empty shells. And each time, the assault teams were ambushed on their way back to the main fleet. Ryan Mitchell's squadrons were ghosts in the asteroids. They knew every rock, every shadow. The Zethkar assault ships were easy targets in the open space. They died one by one, silently, never knowing where the attacks came from. "We are bleeding ships," Rethik reported to Vextel. "Every action costs us more than it gains us." And the humans still refused to communicate. Vextel was beginning to understand a terrible truth. His entire strategy was based on breaking enemy morale through psychological warfare. But psychological warfare required communication. You had to hear the enemy's fear to feed on it. You had to receive their pleas to enjoy your power. The humans gave him nothing. No fear to exploit, no pleas to reject. Just silence and violence. "We need to change our approach," Rethik suggested carefully. "Perhaps we should consider withdrawing and trying a different strategy." "Withdrawing?" Vextel's voice was dangerous. "We have never withdrawn from a conquest. The Empire would see it as weakness." "The Empire is not here, sir." "We are. And we are losing." On Mars, Beth Torres was coordinating another defense. The Zethkar were launching a major assault on the colony. She could see hundreds of ships approaching. This was going to be bad. She looked at her crew. They were scared but steady. They all knew the plan. They all knew their jobs. And they all knew to stay silent. The Zethkar fleet entered Mars orbit and began bombardment. Defense satellites died. Surface installations exploded. The colony shook under the assault. But Beth's forces did not break. They did not call for help. They just fought. Hidden weapons batteries fired from craters and canyons. Missiles launched from underground silos. The defense ships that had been hiding on the far side of Mars's moons came racing in with weapons hot. The Zethkar had expected an easy victory over a panicked colony. Instead, they got a coordinated defense that hurt them badly. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it was over, Mars was damaged but standing. The Zethkar had lost 40 ships. They retreated to regroup. Beth looked at the casualty reports. 73 dead, 200 wounded. 3 surface installations destroyed. But they had held. And they had done it in silence. On Europa, Paul Brennan was facing his own assault. The Zethkar were trying to crack the ice and reach the colony below. His small force was running out of ammunition. He wanted to call for help. He wanted to ask Earth for supplies. But the orders were clear. Maintain silence. So Paul did what humans do best. He improvised. His engineers rigged explosive charges for mining equipment. His pilots used their ship's engines to melt ice and create steam clouds that confused enemy sensors. His defenders set traps and ambushed using nothing but basic tools and clever thinking. The Zethkar kept attacking. Paul's people kept defending. In silence, on Sentinel-7, Dan Sullivan was dealing with a new problem. A Zethkar battleship had taken position near his station and was pounding it with heavy weapons. The station's shields were holding, but they would not hold forever. Dan's weapons could hurt the battleship, but not destroy it. He needed help. Earth had ships that could take on a battleship, but asking for help meant breaking silence. It meant sending a signal the Zethkar could intercept. Dan made his choice. He would not break silence. Instead, he used his tactical computer to calculate firing solutions and sent them through the hardline network to the nearest human ships. The message was simple. Target coordinates. Time to fire. The human ships received the message. They moved into position silently. At exactly the right moment, 3 human destroyers came around Earth's moon and opened fire on the battleship. Combined with Sentinel-7's weapons, they overwhelmed the battleship's shields. The battleship exploded. The Zethkar never understood how the ambush had been coordinated. They saw no signals. They heard no communications. The humans just appeared and killed one of their best ships. Jake Harrison watched the battle reports coming in from across the solar system. The Zethkar were learning to fear the silence. Every time they thought they understood human tactics, the humans did something unexpected. And they did it all without sending a single interceptable message. Dr. Lisa Monroe was analyzing the psychological impact on the Zethkar. She had been monitoring their internal communications, listening to their growing confusion and fear. "They are breaking," she told Jake. "Their commanders are arguing with each other. Their soldiers are scared. They have never faced an enemy like this. What are they saying?" Jake asked. Lisa played some recordings. The Zethkar voices were translated by the computer. "How do they coordinate without talking?" One said, "It is like fighting shadows." "They are not natural," another insisted. "They must be using some technology we cannot detect." "Or they are simply better than us," a third voice said quietly. That last comment made Jake smile. Maybe the silence was teaching the Zethkar more than just military tactics. Maybe it was teaching them humility. Captain Amy Wright was commanding a patrol ship near Saturn when disaster struck. A Zethkar cruiser caught her ship by surprise. The battle was short and brutal. Her ship was crippled, life support failing, engines dead. She had 8 crew members alive. They climbed into an escape shuttle and launched. The shuttle was damaged too. They were drifting, losing power, oxygen running low. Any other time, they would send a distress signal. Every instinct said to call for help, but Amy looked at her crew and shook her head. "No signals," she said quietly. "We drift in silence." "Captain, we will die," her navigator protested. "Maybe," Amy admitted. "But if we send a signal, the Zethkar will intercept it. They will know a ship was here. They will learn our patrol patterns. That information could get hundreds of people killed." She looked at each of them. "We hold the line. Even here, even now." The crew was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, they nodded. They would drift in silence. They would hope for rescue, but would not call for it. That was what the mission required. The shuttle's emergency beacon stayed off. They drifted in the darkness, conserving oxygen, conserving power, waiting, back on Earth. The tracking computers noticed that Amy's ship had missed its check-in, but check-ins were done through physical docking. The war had been going on for 4 weeks. 4 weeks of silence. 4 weeks of blood. Jake Harrison stood in the command center and looked at the casualty reports. The numbers were growing. Every day, more names were added to the list. People he had trained with, people he had served with, people who had trusted him to make the right choice. "Mars reports another successful defense," Chris Parker said quietly. "But they lost another defense platform. And 37 more people." Jake nodded. He did not trust himself to speak. 37 more. That made almost 3,000 dead across all the colonies. 3,000 people who had died in silence, fighting an enemy that had expected them to beg. "Sir, we are getting supply requests from multiple stations. Ammunition is running low. Spare parts are running out. Route them through the supply network," Jake ordered. "Silent deliveries only." The supply network was another part of the plan. Ships moved between stations without broadcasting their routes. They docked physically, transferred supplies, and moved on. It was slow. It was inefficient. But it kept the silence. On Mars, Beth Torres was dealing with the same problems. Her colony was running out of everything: missiles, power cells, medical supplies, food. The underground shelters were crowded and the air recyclers were struggling. She wanted to ask Earth for help. She wanted to tell them how desperate things were getting. But every time she reached for the communication controls, she stopped herself. The mission was more important than comfort. The silence was more important than convenience. Her second-in-command, Maya Chun, brought her the latest status report. We have enough ammunition for maybe 2 more major battles. Medical supplies are critical. We have wounded people who need treatment we cannot provide. I know, Beth said tiredly. She had not slept in 3 days. None of them had. We hold the line. That is all we can do. At what cost? Maya asked quietly. How many more have to die? Beth looked at her. As many as it takes. We chose this path. We knew it would be hard. On Europa, Paul Brennan was watching his small force fall apart. They were down to 3 operational ships. The colony's defensive weapons were nearly depleted, and the Zethkar kept coming. His crew was exhausted. They were scared, and they were starting to question why they had to stay silent. Why could they not just call for help? Why could they not just surrender and live? Paul gathered them together in the command center. He looked at their tired faces and knew he had to give them a reason to keep fighting. I know this is hard, he said. I know you want to break silence. I want to break silence. But we cannot. He paused. The Zethkar have conquered 73 species. Every one of those species begged. Every one of them pleaded. And every one of them is now a slave. He pointed at the screens showing the enemy fleet. We are hurting them. Not because we have better weapons. Not because we have more ships. We are hurting them because we refuse to play their game. Every day we stay silent, we prove that their way is not the only way. Every day we hold, we give hope to every other species under their control. One of his pilots spoke up. But we are dying. Is pride worth dying for? This is not about pride, Paul said. This is about survival. If we beg, they will conquer us. If we plead, they will enslave us. The only way we survive as free people is if we refuse to give them what they want. And what they want is our fear, our submission, our acknowledgement of their power. He looked around the room. So we stay silent, and we hold the line. The crew was quiet for a long moment. Then, one by one, they nodded. They would hold. They would stay silent, even if it killed them. Captain Amy Wright and her crew had been drifting in their damaged shuttle for 12 days. The oxygen was almost gone. The power was failing. They were cold and tired and scared. Her navigator was barely conscious. Her engineer had died 3 days ago. The others were weak and fading. Amy knew they did not have much time left. She looked at the emergency beacon control. 1 button press. That was all it would take. 1 signal and the Zethkar might pick them up. They might be captured, but at least they would live. Or maybe a human ship would find them first. Her hand hovered over the button. It would be so easy. Just 1 press. Who would blame her? But she remembered her training. She remembered the mission. She remembered that 3,000 people had died to maintain this silence. Could she be the one to break it? Could she live with herself if her signal led the enemy to other humans? Amy pulled her hand back. Not today. Not ever. If they died out here, they died with honor. They died holding the line. She closed her eyes and waited. On Don Sullivan's station. Sentinel-7, things were getting desperate. Zethkar had figured out that the station was a major defensive hub. They were throwing everything at it. Wave after wave of attacks. The station's shields were failing. Hull breaches were spreading. Half his crew was dead or wounded. Don stood on his bridge and watched the enemy ships coming in for another attack. His weapons were almost out of ammunition. His power reserves were at 20%. He could not hold much longer. His tactical officer looked at him. Sir, we should evacuate. We have done our part. We have held them off for weeks. No, Don said simply. This station controls the approach to Earth. If it falls, the planet is exposed. We hold until we cannot hold anymore. Sir, that means we all die. Yes, Don agreed. It probably does. The officer was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded and turned back to his console. Then we die well. In silence. The attack came. Sentinel-7 fought back with everything it had. When the weapons ran out of ammunition, Don used the station's thrusters to ram approaching ships. When the power failed, they used handheld weapons to fight off boarding parties. And when there was nothing left to fight with, they sealed themselves in the command center and waited for the end, but the end did not come. Because Jake Harrison had been watching the battle through the sensor network. He saw Sentinel-7 dying. He saw Dan's crew making their last stand. And he made a decision. Launch the relief force, Jake ordered. All available ships to Sentinel-7, now. Sir, that will leave Earth's close defense weakened, Chris warned. I know. Do it anyway. Those people have held that station for a month. We do not abandon them now. 30 ships broke orbit from Earth and headed for Sentinel-7. They moved fast and silent, communicating only through prearranged signals. The Zethkar never saw them coming until it was too late. The battle was short and brutal. The relief force hit the Zethkar from behind while Sentinel-7's crew fought from inside their dying station. Together, they drove the enemy back. When it was over, Don Sullivan sat in his shattered command center and watched human ships docking with his station. Rescue teams were coming aboard. Medical teams were treating his wounded. Supply ships were bringing replacement systems. Don looked at his surviving crew. Only 12 of them left from a complement of 80. But they had maintained the silence. And they had survived. Back on Earth, Lisa Monroe was analyzing the latest intelligence from Zethkar communications. What she was seeing made her call Jake immediately. Admiral, you need to hear this, she said urgently. Jake came to the intelligence center. Lisa played him the recordings. The silence is breaking them, she said. Listen to their commanders. They are arguing constantly. Their soldiers are refusing orders. Their fleet cohesion is falling apart. Jake listened to the translated conversations. The Zethkar were confused, frightened, and beginning to doubt themselves. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this. They did not know how to win against an opponent who would not communicate. How much longer can they hold together? Jake asked. Not long, Lisa said. Maybe another week or two. Their entire military doctrine is based on psychological dominance. We have negated that completely. They are fighting a war they do not know how to fight. And then we push harder, Jake decided. We make them understand that this silence will never break. Ryan Mitchell's squadron launched a major attack on the Zethkar supply lines. They hit 3 supply convoys in 12 hours, all without sending a single signal. The convoys were destroyed. The Zethkar fleet began to run out of ammunition and fuel. Beth Torres led a counterattack from Mars. Her forces, reinforced by fresh supplies from Earth, struck at the Zethkar ships in orbit. They destroyed 15 ships and forced the rest to retreat. Still in silence, Paul Brennan's tiny force on Europa held against another major assault. They were down to 2 ships and almost no ammunition, but they held. And the Zethkar, seeing this small group refuse to break, began to wonder if they could ever win. The turning point came on day 38 of the war. A Zethkar destroyer captain, tired of fighting an enemy he could not understand, decided to surrender. He brought his ship to a human station and requested asylum. He did not send a message. He just showed up and waited. The humans, maintaining silence, brought him aboard and took his crew prisoner. But they treated them well. They gave them food and medical care, and they did it all without saying a word. The destroyer captain, whose name was Kethel, was brought before Kate Richardson. Through a translator he spoke. Why do you not speak? He asked. Why do you refuse all communication? Kate looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. Because you expected us to speak. You expected us to beg. We chose to disappoint you. 6 weeks after the Zethkar ultimatum, Commander Vextal sat alone in his command chamber. His fleet was broken. Of the 300 ships he had brought to Earth, barely 150 remained. The rest were destroyed or damaged beyond repair, but it was not the losses that troubled him most. It was the silence. His soldiers were demoralized. His officers were questioning orders, and his superiors in the Empire were demanding answers. How could a single species with inferior numbers and technology resist the might of the Zethkar Empire? Vextal had no answer. Because the truth was too shameful to admit, he was being defeated by silence, by an enemy that refused to communicate, by prey that would not beg. Rethik entered the chamber. His second-in-command looked exhausted. They all were. "Sir, we have another problem," Rethik said quietly. 3 more ships have deserted. Their captains left messages saying they will not continue this war. "Deserters," Vextal said bitterly. "The humans have infected us with their defiance. The humans have shown us something we did not want to see," Rethik corrected. "That our way is not the only way. That psychological warfare only works on those who will engage with it." Vextal looked at his tactical display. The human forces were still there, still silent, still dangerous. Every attack he launched was met with coordinated defense. Every probe was met with ambush. And still, not a single human had sent a plea for mercy. "What do we do?" Vextal asked. It was the first time he had ever asked that question. "We withdraw," Rethik said. "There is no victory here, only more death." On Earth, Jake Harrison was reading the same intelligence that told him the Zethkar were breaking: desertion, low morale, supply problems. The silence had worked better than he had dared hope. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked Chris. 28 combat-capable vessels, sir. 7 more under repair. The rest are gone." Jake nodded slowly. They had started with 50 ships. Now they had less than 30. But the Zethkar had lost more than half their fleet. In a war of attrition, humanity was winning by losing less. "What are our casualty figures?" Chris was quiet for a moment. 4,312 dead, sir. "Across all colonies and ships?" "Another 2,000 wounded. 4,000 dead." Jake felt the weight of every single one. Every name on that list was someone who had died because of his decision to maintain silence. Every family that had lost someone could blame him, but they had held. Against impossible odds, they had held. "Sir, we are receiving a new message from the Zethkar," Chris said. "It is from Commander Vextal himself." "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. Vextal appeared on the hologram. He looked tired, defeated. His scales were dull, and his eyes had lost their cruel shine. "Humans of Earth," Vextal said slowly. "I am Commander Vextal of the Zethkar Empire. For 6 weeks, we have attacked your worlds. For 6 weeks, you have defended them. And for 6 weeks, you have maintained your silence." He paused. Jake watched silently, waiting. "I have conquered many species. I have broken many wills. But I cannot break yours. Because you refuse to engage? You refuse to communicate. You refuse to acknowledge our power." Vextal's voice was bitter. "You have taught me a lesson I did not want to learn. That silence can be stronger than any weapon." Jake felt his heart pounding. This was it. The moment they had been waiting for. "I am requesting negotiations," Vextal continued. "I am asking for terms of withdrawal. Please respond. Please speak. The silence has won. You have proven your point." The hologram ended. The command center was absolutely quiet. Everyone was looking at Jake, waiting for his response. Kate Richardson entered the command center. "That message is being broadcast across the entire galaxy," she said. "Every species under Zethkar control just heard their conqueror admit defeat. To silence." Jake stood up. "Send a reply. Audio only." Chris set up the communication channel. For the first time in 6 weeks, Earth was about to broadcast a message. Jake took a deep breath and spoke. "Commander Vextal, you came to our solar system with 300 ships. You demanded our surrender. You expected us to plead. We chose silence instead. Not because we could not speak, but because we chose not to give you the satisfaction. Jake paused, letting his words sink in. You asked for terms of withdrawal. Here are our terms. You will leave our solar system immediately. You will never return. You will broadcast a message to every species in the galaxy that humanity is not to be threatened or conquered. And you will do this knowing that if you ever come back, we will meet you with silence again. And that silence will destroy you. Do you accept these terms? Jake asked. There was a long pause. Then Vextel's voice came back, defeated and quiet. We accept. We will withdraw. Then go, Jake said simply. And remember, we could have spoken at any time. We chose not to. That choice was ours, not yours. Remember that. He cut the transmission. The command center erupted in cheers. People were crying, hugging, celebrating. They had won. Against all odds, humanity had won, but Jake did not celebrate. He was thinking of the 4,000 dead. The price of victory had been terrible. On Mars, Beth Torres received the news and allowed herself a moment of weakness. She sat down in her command chair and cried. Her people gathered around her, offering comfort. They had held their world. They had survived. On Europa, Paul Brennan's tiny force celebrated quietly. They had been down to one ship and no ammunition. One more day and they would have been overrun. But they had lasted long enough. They had held the line on Sentinel-7. Don Sullivan and his surviving crew watched the Zethkar fleet begin to withdraw. The station was a wreck, barely holding together, but it was still there. Still standing, still silent until the very end. Captain Ryan Mitchell brought his squadron home from the asteroid belt. They had been the ghosts that haunted the Zethkar supply lines. They had done their job well. Amy Wright was recovering in a hospital on Earth. When she heard the news, she cried tears of relief. The silence had held. Her sacrifice had meant something. Over the next 3 days, the Zethkar fleet left the solar system. Every ship, every soldier. They went home defeated, not by superior weapons or numbers, but by an enemy who had refused to fight on their terms. As the last Zethkar ship crossed out of sensor range, Jake Harrison finally allowed himself to relax. It was over. They had survived. Kate Richardson stood beside him. We need to speak to the galaxy now, she said. Other species are watching. They want to know about the humans who fought in silence. Then let us speak, Jake said. The silence has served its purpose. Now we can tell our story. The message went out to every species that could receive it. Kate delivered it personally. We are humanity, she began. 6 weeks ago, the Zethkar Empire came to our worlds and demanded surrender. They expected us to plead. They expected us to beg. They expected us to acknowledge their power and accept our place as slaves. We chose silence instead. Not because we had nothing to say, but because we chose to say it through our actions rather than our words. We showed them that dignity does not require permission. That freedom does not need to be negotiated. That sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. She paused, looking into the camera that would carry her message across the stars. To every species under Zethkar control, we say this. You do not have to beg. You do not have to plead. You can choose silence. You can choose defiance. You can choose to stand on your own terms. It will be hard. It will cost you. But it can be done. We have proven it. To the Zethkar we say this. Never return. Never threaten us again. We have shown you what happens when your psychological warfare meets those who refuse to be afraid. Learn from this lesson, or ignore it at your own peril. And to the galaxy we say this. Humanity is here. We will defend our worlds. We will stand for our freedom. And we will do it on our terms. Not yours. Never yours. The message ended. And the galaxy listened. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. 6 species under Zethkar control began rebellions. They had heard about the silent humans. They had heard that psychological warfare could be defeated, and they chose to try. The Zethkar Empire, already weakened by their defeat at Earth, could not handle multiple rebellions at once. Their empire began to crumble. Their ships withdrew from contested systems. Their power faded, and humanity watched, knowing that their choice to stay silent had changed the galaxy forever. Jake Harrison stood at a memorial ceremony on Earth. They had built a wall with the names of all who had died. 4,312 names. Each one was someone who had chosen silence over surrender. Someone who had held the line. "We remember them," Jake said to the gathered crowd. "We remember their choice. We remember their sacrifice. And we remember that silence can be the loudest statement of all." Beth Torres was there, standing with her surviving crew from Mars. Paul Brennan had come from Europa. Don Sullivan stood with the 12 survivors from Sentinel-7. Ryan Mitchell and his Ghost Squadron were present. Amy Wright, still recovering but strong enough to attend, stood with the crew who had drifted in silence for 12 days. They were all there. Everyone who had held the line. Everyone who had maintained the silence. Kate Richardson spoke next. "We did not choose this path because it was easy. We chose it because it was right. Because sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play by your enemy's rules."